stream on Sunday night, each and every Sunday night at 11 p.m. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to tune in either tonight on the live stream or in the rerun. Either way, we really do appreciate you taking the time to watch. How's everybody doing this evening? I'm sitting here getting ready to put my Yamaha acoustic away back in its case. I did a show on it. Started filming a show for it this week where as I said last live stream, that we were going to cover Do Acoustic Guitars Wear Out? Unfortunately, Fern was unable to have time in his schedule to have me come down and film him at his shop, which is what I want to do. I want to talk to a luthier about that subject. I think that's appropriate. And so he didn't have the time, so I had to reschedule it for tomorrow to film him. So we didn't do a show this week, but that's only because, like I said, just putting it together ended up taking a little bit more time than I thought it would. Schedules conflicting and everything, but that's okay. Let's put a little bit more light here on the subject. There we go. But that's okay. That will get out probably on Tuesday. I'll put it out. But it's going to be a good one. I hope you do enjoy it when it does come out. Again, the topic is talking about acoustic guitars. My Yamaha here. I have had this guitar, if you don't know. It's my oldest guitar. I've had it for 25 years now. I bought it in Shibuya in the Yamaha shop. And I'm very curious as to, the thought of an acoustic guitar wearing out. Certainly not in my lifetime with this one, but hey, Ben, good evening. Yeah, this is a nice one. It's been all the acoustic guitar that I've really needed. I need to take it into Fern to have a few things checked out on it, but for 25 years it's held up great, and has been all I've needed acoustic guitar wise. It's funny, I've had literally quite dozens of electric guitars, but in terms of acoustic guitars I just ordered a red label made in Japan. Sweet, tell me more about that. A red label. That's great. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. But for 25 years, this has been all the acoustic guitar I've needed. I haven't had a desire to have really a huge collection of acoustics, because this one is just so doggone nice. So I've been fortunate in that regard. So no, because of scheduling, unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that show, but that will be coming up, like I said, on Tuesday, as soon as I film Fern talking about that subject. And he actually has some an interesting take on it. So when I texted him and told him what it was about, he was like, "Oh, okay, I have a few things to say." So we'll be sharing those with you next week. What else? Yeah, guys, it was a weird week for me. It wasn't, I guess I'm into. It's a F60s. Oh, okay, Ben. Now I know what it is. I got you. Wow, that's nice. Expensive? Yeah. I got you. I know it. I know it model. Although I haven't checked in the price of those. Those have to be a little pricey, but well worth it. Yeah, that's a nice one. That's sweet. But yeah, myself, again, 25 years ago, I walked into a guitar shop, and even on that day, I wasn't planning on buying anything. It was just one of my days off between gigs. Usually when I played live in Tokyo at that time, for those early tours that I did, those were not cheap. I think it's around, yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, man. That's a serious piece of work there. But, 25 years from now, when you still have it and you're enjoying it, then, it's worth every penny. So, yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Yeah, I wasn't even planning on that day on buying anything, as I seem to recall. And it was just hot. And those days, my schedules were pretty grueling. I only got 2 Sundays off a month. Every other day, I was working on the Sundays that I was not, because the clubs were closed on Sundays, there were the nightclubs were closed, but the supper clubs were open. So 2 Sundays out of a month, I had to work a supper club. It was called Khan's Corner in Yokohama. I'm sitting behind the piano. What do you prefer, an electric or acoustic? In my line of work, actually, I have a need for both. When it comes to just sitting around because of doing production work, I have to have them both, depending upon what the client needs or what the song requires. Sitting around the house, I'm not the sitting around the house playing my acoustic guitar type guy. I have to be honest with you. I think one of the reasons why it's kept so well in the last, 25 years, as I said, is because I keep it in its case. I do play it. You have to play them. You have to take your. You can't just let them say. I'm always in awe of these rock guitar stars that the big guys, the heavy hitters, who just have these rooms full of instruments, and you're like, dude, there's no way you're possibly going to be able to go through each and every one of those and play them at some point. And that's really not good for the instruments. They need to be played. So I do take it out and, of course, service it, change the strings, do that kind of thing. But sitting around the house, it's my electric guitar, even unplugged. I hate to keep talking about it, but it's just a fact. It's why it ended up being my Les Paul. The Epiphone 1959 kit is a very acoustically nice guitar. Even sitting there on your couch and strumming it, it makes a fine sound, a fantastic sound for just sitting there and working things out. I plug in to my amp from time to time, but it's always an acoustic guitar kind of deficit going on yeah, as far as just sitting around strumming. And even from a writing standpoint, I write from an electric guitar. So a lot of the last album I did, I wrote just sitting from my electric guitar and working things out. Yeah. So that is a great segue. Thanks for asking that question. Into tonight's main subject, vintage gear. It can be a fool's dream. And what do I mean by that? Why did I choose that as a topic tonight? Well, it happened to me that I discovered that not everything vintage is gold this last week. If you weren't here for the last live stream, which by the way did fantastic. That last live stream we did last weekend was my biggest numbers yet, over 1,000 streams, and climbing on that one. I guess it was the title or something. But yeah, that one is starting to make the round, so I'm happy about that. But in that live stream, I talked about my greenbacks that I discovered had been reconed. So not long after that program, I put those greenbacks up. Oh, thanks, Ben. Well, you know what, guys? Congratulations to you too. I think this feedback, this back and forth, I think a lot of people like seeing it. And again, like I said, it's more like a conversation than a lecture. I have the tendency to sit there sometimes and lecture, and I have to say, hey, it's not that kind of party. On some subjects, if I'm passionate about them. So I gotta watch that. Anyway, with those greenbacks and being reconed, it really diminished the value of them. I took a big hit on that, and the subject last week was about reverb and taking hit about 12.5% commissions you're going to pay out on the overall total package of whatever you ship through them, you move through them. And those greenbacks were no exception. I put them up for $250 because, quite frankly, with the recone, if they were not reconed, then I could have gone anywhere to $250 a piece. But I had to list them as $250 for a pair, $125 each, and I got an immediate offer. I have a 1963 Valiant GA made in Japan, found in a pawn shop. Wow, that's a find for you. We'll put a pin into the greenbacks for right now, and we'll talk about Japanese wood because it's also a subject I'm going to talk about later tonight. Those guitars that were made, especially in the Nagano region of Japan. Here I go lecturing. No, but I'll make it interesting. I'll make it worth your while. I spent a lot of time in that region of Japan. I know it very well, and it was because of the lumber that they had. They had, after the war, a lot of people had to decide what industry were we going to go into because there were restrictions on what they could and could not manufacture. And lumber seemed to be a great idea. So they started planting all of these forests using this really good, wood. It took from that time, 1947, 48, 49, until the mid 60s when a lot of those began to get to the point where, where were we talking about? 20 years it took, even before they could even begin to think about cutting these. But going into the 60s, these were some of the first ones that were from that. Or of course, they had trees there before that they were harvesting that were older than that. But it was just that, what I'm saying is that industry is what spawned the guitar making industry. Initially, they were making sewing machines for Singer. Singer was a company that sold out of Sears catalogs, since the beginning of time, the 1800s that I know of. Singer's been around. But they were manufacturing, because of that wood that they had, they were manufacturing these sewing machines. Well, that kind of fell out of favor in this going into the 60s. So they had to think of something else to do, and they started producing electric and acoustic guitars. And some of the wood, getting to my point, is like the example of your guitar there that you got in the pawn shop. Some of those woods could be as old as 100 years. Certainly, because as I said, they planted new growth, but they still had the old. Good morning. They still had the old growth forest that they were using, and those are fine instruments. It's the reason why I'm a big fan of Japanese-made guitars. Certainly, as I've indicated to you guys, I'm looking at that FGN semi-acoustic electric guitar that's made in that region as well. For that reason, you're getting quality woods. You're getting custom shop quality wood for a fraction of the price when you buy those Japanese guitars from Nagano. If you can find the old ones in the shop that are sound, still structurally sound, that's tough, especially if they've been through rough condition. I don't know what the condition yours was in. I guess it was great. That's great. But if you can find one in good condition, that's a buy, guys. Always look out for those made in Japan guitars. The wood is excellent. Some of it's old is old on some of those. I know on some of the early electrics, the acoustics I'm not very familiar with, but I'm going to assume that's probably true as well. So yeah, the Japanese made in Japan guitars are a buy. If you can run into one, especially the 70s, 60s, and the later 60s and the 70s ones. So those greenbacks, yeah. So getting back to that, so I put them up and I sold them, but I learned a lesson from that, and that got me thinking. I knew, I knew when I got them that half of them had the original cones in there. It was a set of four, a quad. But it didn't bother me because actually, at the end of the day, I've made a little bit more. I made a little bit money back on that. I really only needed the two that were the original cone ones, and those I'll retain those. But it got me thinking about the fragile. Is that the word? How fragile. Uh, Hey, I appreciate that. I'm glad to see everybody's doing well. I'm glad to see everybody here this evening. Don't forget to hit that like button, guys. Yeah, I learned that is a very fragile thing because even a small thing. Now, again, we're talking about a speaker, so the metal frame, the original decal backing on that thing, everything, the I forget what that's called, that spiral down the, God, somebody help me here, the coning or whatever it's called down there at the bottom, conning or whatever it's called, spiral, was original. The only thing that had been done to this is it had been reconed. And just that in itself destroyed the market value of this vintage thing. Everything else there, and I said that to the buyer, a guy that I did sell it to, those have already shipped. I said, what you can do is you can order an EVH cone and stick it in this, and you're pretty much well getting back there, tone wise to the original cone, from what I've been told. Johan Segeborn on his channel, he talks about that. But yeah, it devalued them to the point where they were worth half of, of what they should have been. Uh, so, if you're going into the vintage market, um, just keep in mind that even if it is complete, like, for example, my vintage Echoplex here at my feet, even if it is complete and well serviced, that it's a fragile market. And what do I mean by that? Well, I did a little bit of digging investigation for this live stream because, again, the experience I had this week with the greenbacks got me thinking about it. And I took a look at, we mentioned that this blues breaker here behind me, because of saturation, the amount of items that are on the market for sale at this point, the value on the open marketplace has declined. And I took a look at my Echoplex here as well because I was curious. I hadn't checked its price recently. And even though the Echoplex is obviously even more rare thing these days, a lot rarer than I thought, looking around, item to get. Because once you get one and it was good, people generally tend to hold on to them. They don't come up on the market that often, maybe a half a dozen at any given time. But even with that being the case, that they're a very rare thing, and I found half a dozen, as I said, on Reverb, the value of them has dropped significantly since April of this year, where they were selling at a high of 1280, down to the point now where they're averaging around $500. No, I'm sorry, scratch that. 700 and 750. They're averaging around 750. So they've dropped down that, 400, what is that, 464, almost, we'll just say 500, the rounded up dollar difference drop within this year. Now, if you had purchased your Echoplex at the height of this market, you've obviously already started to see a negative return on that investment. And that's on something, they always tell you that when you buy vintage things, that you really should look for the things that have a story to them. Something that people will know about, not directly, but probably indirectly. The Echoplex is an excellent example of that because, if you're into Van Halen and you start doing any kind of, basic research into his rig, you find the Echoplex being a predominant part of his overall sound. So then that leads you to saying, okay, what's an echoplex if you're not familiar with it, if you're a young person. So they always encourage you to look for things that have a story because of that reason. That there will always be a perceived market for it, we'll say. But as you can see, even in the case of my Echoplex, it has lost value in this year. Now, I'm still in the green on it because I've bought it. It's been quite a while now since I've had this, but I will say that the price is around what I paid for it. So in that 5 year time or something, we'll say that I've had it. Well, I'll just say 5. I'm too tired to really try to think about when did I get this. No, I can do that. 4 years, 4 to 5 years time that I've had this. I have not lost money on it. However, it has not dramatically increased in value. For a short period, it did. For a short period, I could have sold it I could have doubled my money on it. But again, and it's not out of an issue of surplus on the market, as I stated, as the case with the Marshall Blues Breakers. In this case, it is just, it's not something that people are going to be reaching out for necessarily. It's almost, I'm not going to say frivolous thing to own, but the truth of the matter is that there are pedal versions of it that you can buy. So unless you're diehard, gotta have everything original, I gotta have this, gotta have that. Like me, guys like me, in my case with my greenbacks and all this other stuff, because I gotta have that sound. Because I grew up with that sound, so it's the sound in my head. So certainly I want to start from there. It really is not something that people are going to be reaching out for. Collectors, certainly, absolutely. There are collectors out there, but they're going to be savvy. For an item like this, if I was a collector, which I'm not, in this case, I got one and I'm good. But if I was a collector, I would wait exactly for this kind of moment where the price is declining. I'm not going to buy it at the height of the market. I'm going to wait till they drip down, and then I'm going to lowball. I got 2 offers on those greenbacks, and the first one, as I suspected, was a lowball offer. It was probably a dealer. They knew what they were and what could be done with them, and they knew the position I was in as well, and they tried to lowball me. But fortunately, somebody gave me very close to my asking, so that was all right. But yeah, unless they're collectors, they're really not going to be screaming for a vintage Echoplex. It's just the fact of the matter, and thus you saw that happen with that. So not all things, even if they have a story, is going to gain you riches. Now, if you're into it, again, for the mojo and for the overall tone, because they do as delivered, this Echoplex really, it does as they say. There's no pixie dust to it, but it is as advertised, as I always say. It does as advertised. Certainly at this point, it's something that I can't see myself living without, so therefore I'm a holder. And again, like I said, that causes a scarcity on the market. But in this case, the scarcity does not equate into an increase in price. It doesn't always work that way in the vintage market. I've said this before, and I'll say it again, that the price is the map, the terrain. The value is the location. That location is going to move around just like, your old West settlement until they find that spot that fits, that works for everybody. And that's the name of this game. And so, yeah, if whoever that was who made that deal at $12.80 in April, I'll put it to you this way. Whoever made that deal on Reverb at $12.80 in April has lost if they tried to resell, they've lost a value on it because the going market price on those is around $780 now, 750, 780. So no guarantee there. So there are no guarantees there in vintage stuff. I have a few pieces of vintage gear laying around, and none of them that I can think of at this moment. This Yamaha is getting into the vintage territory, but even at the time, this model was a mid-tier model. It wasn't a top-end model. It was their mid model. So I can't see it really garnering any kind of premium if I were to sell it either. So yeah, my message here tonight, folks, is giving you real life. You know, this is me. This is what happened to me. You know, dipping my toe ever so lightly into the vintage market and the things that I've discovered, the things that I've observed as well. You know, sure, again, like I said, fantastic thing to have vintage gear, especially if it does do as advertised. You know, if it makes your sound or creates, again, like I said, you know, making music is also about environment. You know, I knew a producer friend of mine back in the '90s. He was an R&B producer, and he did that song, a very popular song back in the '90s called "This Is How We Do It," and I think that was a big hit for him. But his production company, and I know he wasn't making a dime. I know he had a terrible deal because anybody had a decent deal wouldn't have been in this situation. Had rented out a space in this building that had all these miniature office spaces that you could buy, and they had taken his studio, put it in one, and it was glass 360 around this room, and he's sitting in there and he's trying to come up with their next hit. And Jock was with me. You know, I'll have to ask Jock if he remembers this because we went together because we were writing duo ourselves. We were production duo ourselves in LA at that time. And I said to Jock, I don't know how this guy could work with all of these people walking around all the time, drinking coffee, looking at papers, having conversation, leaning against the window. How can you work in this environment? It's setting yourself up to fail. Um, but yeah, I tell that story just because I couldn't imagine being creative in that environment. I've been in small studios that were in real, you know, the B and C rooms, and those were to my. I didn't like the A rooms. I never liked recording the A rooms. I just I like the intimacy and the smallness of a you know a smaller room. You know, a 32 track room is usually the B rooms. And you could light some candles, man, or you could, you know, sit there and just daydream, or you could just get into the mood, dim the lights, turn the lights up, crank some music, do whatever you had to do, but you had the intimacy of that space. So music is a part of that. That's part of that's part of it. And then of course there's the mojo of the vintage stuff, and you bring those together, and I think that you can really. Whoops, lost our light here. I think that's something that you can really be productive in. That's a good productive environment. You have the right tools and the right environment. So vintage gear certainly being a big, if that's my philosophy, which it is, being a big part of that, I don't discourage the purchase of vintage gear at all. I'm just saying to you guys that don't expect it to make you rich. You know, there are certainly guitars out there that you could purchase that you know may go up in value. But if you've noticed, even in that market, because I've been looking at the vintage guitar market, things haven't gone up the way that you think that they would. I was looking at what was that, a '64 SG, completely legit, original from a well-known dealer, trusted dealer, original. And I was astounded that they were only asking $8,000 for it. Now, to my mind, that I remember, the custom shops, especially when you get into, some of the custom paint job stuff that they're doing lately out of there, they cost just as much. So you're trying to tell me that I can get a vintage 64 SG for the same price that I would pay for the modern uh, replica? Blew my mind. I expected. Now that's of course that. You're not gonna get you're not gonna get a 68 or 69 Les Paul for that kind of money. Those generally are starting to go into the $20,000 range. But still, even with those haven't skyrocketed the way they should, especially when you consider the '68 Les Paul, even with the P90s, was made by the same guys who made the 52, 53, 54. Those same guys made those guitars, which means that there is no difference between a 68 Les Paul and a 60s Les Paul, a 1960. But again, that's another thing about vintage, gear is a tricky market, and unless you spend hours of time really researching it, really taking a close look at whatever it is that you're focusing in on purchasing, and really getting a good understanding of it, and whether it's not something that you should be investing in, because I had a vintage guy tell me once, never buy the Les Paul specials from back in the 50s. Don't ever buy those, he said. Those were meant to be student guitars. They're problematical. They're not great players, so that's a vintage guitar you want to stay away from. They still command a premium price, however, but in his warning to me was stay away from those. Interesting. So, yeah, so it's a minefield, guys, is what I'm talking about tonight. The vintage market is a minefield. And unless you're really specific about something that you're looking for, I'd stay out of it, I'd stay away from it. From an investment standpoint, yeah, not everything's going to give you that 10% year on year that beats inflation. You're not going to, not every guitar is going to do that for you, or piece of gear. And for some reason, and I don't understand quite why, I'm going to sit here and try to pretend like I understand why. I'll figure it out though. There is a stagflation occurring in the vintage market right now. And if you know what stagflation means, then no need to get into that. But yeah, there's a stagflation in that market. It's really interesting. Again, I don't know. I could speculate. That would be a whole nother subject for a whole nother time. But it's an interesting thing to see. As I said, I'm not seeing an increase in the prices there in that market. So, and again, depending upon when you bought, if you bought at the height of the market, then you're feeling the pinch on that if it was an investment. I guess I've learned never buy anything as an investment, really. Buy things because you plan on using them. As I've said to you before, there's nothing in my recording studio that doesn't get used at one point or another. The vintage stuff included. It doesn't sit in a delicate tissue box, and I pull it out every now and then and look at it and put it away very carefully. No, it gets worked. It gets used. And so from that standpoint, that's okay, I guess. But from an investment standpoint, they've been lousy investments. They really have. From a sonic standpoint, awesome. From an investment standpoint, pretty bad. Pretty poor. All right, on to the next subject. Amps in the box. Are you guys familiar with these? So these are the Vox I guess amp in a box. You plug this into your guitar, and you can then take a headphone set, plug it in here, kick this thing on, and you have the classic Vox tone in this little device. These have been out for years and years and years and years. The first design similar to this came out in the 70s in Japan. They were doing a lot of stuff like this. So this is nothing new. But I will say this much. I was wondering how the Vox ones were. I had the Fender one. Ben, how is the Fender one? I'd like to, if you could just chime in here. I had one when I was starting out. Yeah, yeah, I had one of these when I was a kid too that I got at Radio Shack. Anybody remember Radio Shack? Anybody? Am I dating myself? Yeah, we had a Foster's Freeze and a Radio Shack. I'm not kidding, by the way. Probably none of you guys know what those are, but it's impressive, honestly. Yeah. Yeah. So I was getting to that point. But I'm sorry, a little nostalgia there. I actually found a Foster's Freeze. The one that I had when I was growing up as a kid obviously went away. But I found one in Bangkok. Actually, there was one in Bangkok. And yeah, Radio Shack. And I was just delighted after all those years to have that Foster's Freeze. I hadn't had it in so long. So it was kind of a treat. Yeah, so these are pretty interesting. Again, like I said, I had something similar to this from literally from Radio Shack when I was, what would that put me at? 13 or so, I guess. 12 or 13, 14, when I really started messing around with guitar. And my father would have murdered me if I had plugged my guitar into his stereo. There was going to be none of that. But they have really progressed to the point where, as an amp, I'll call this an amp in a box. I really don't know what the technical term is for this. It's basically a portable amp, a pocket amp. I'm impressed with these. And I'm glad to hear Ben say that he was impressed with the Fender one. It was actually a toss-up between the Fender one because I was interested in the Fender Clean. But again, I've been chasing that Vox tone for a long. I still haven't found. I try I had as you guys know, Vox amp. A lot of Vox amp in a box. Ew, those sound horrible. Bought a whole bunch of those. Sounds like a bunch of bees in a can. Noodling. Noodling, brother, I'm so glad you're here. Good to see you. I was thinking about you, sir. Good to see you. Yeah, and again, with these, this one is actually not bad. I wouldn't say that it was fabulous like the Fender one has been said it is, but it's serviceable. It does its job, and I think that's the kind of the scale. I think they go from really great all the way down to mediocre to bees in a can kind of sound. And again, but I said this is not a new thing. And I wanted to talk about that again because I've been talking about not new things, that there really hasn't been a lot of technical advances in instruments in the decades since I was a kid that something like this came out. Now, certainly, it has a lot more going for it. This has a built-in reverb. You can dial in, switch between certain amp tones. The one that I had as a kid was basically, it was a rip-off. It was, again, like I said, and then Tom Schultz. Of course, we all know the Rock Man, So, they went from this size in the 70s for some reason to the size of the Rock Man. I guess because his concept was instead of plugging in like this, you clip it onto your belt. So Rockman walk. Okay, I get it now. After 30 years, I finally get his idea. 40 years. But they went from this size to the Walkman back to this size again. The newer ones, the Fender one and the are much more usable. Yeah. So we've seen riffs. The point of this, gentlemen, is that we've been seeing riffs on the same thing for 50 years now. You know, I would be impressed if there was, and of course there's Bluetooth things, but even the Bluetooth things where you can connect this into your guitar and then another into your amp and you can go wireless and all those things. But they are all basic riffs on the same technology that's been around for 50 years. And I just find that to be, curiouser and curiouser. I really never thought about it. I never, sat back and said to myself, hey, half of this stuff, behind me has been around, for more than half of my life, whether I knew about it or not. But it's been there and it hasn't changed. And it led me to think about the stagnation of technology. Of course, even, your rack mount units of the 70s have now turned into the stomps. And, we all had the pedal things, the all-in-one floor pedal things. And of course, we have the very expensive equivalents now. But those in themselves, again, are just riffs on the same things that have been around for decades. And I worry, again, about, I guess I can't have one live stream without having one deep subject. I don't know how deep it is, but it is a concern of mine, and I thought I would share it with you guys and to see what you think. Because guitar music, as we've pointed out, as we've discussed, is not the predominant music now, rap is, we've seen more advancements in technology for things that would be advantageous to a beat producer than we have for somebody who is a guitar player or a bassist or even a drummer for that matter. Even the drums, we had the Linn drums and the big Linn drums, not the little one, but the Sim drums, the equivalents. And then Roland and Yamaha, all those guys came out with their. But again, there's been nothing since that. It's everything since then, and I've been seeing those since the time I was touring Japan. Hasn't changed. There's been not a lot of advancements for guitar players, drummers, bass players. In other words, music that requires recording not just through synthesis. So in those markets, we've seen huge investments. And I guess that's what I'm saying is it's an investment of money. The money that's poured into that aspect of production has far outshined the money that's been investment in the R&D in the guitar markets, bass and drums and things of those, is what I'm saying to you. Because we haven't seen, if you could come up with a counter argument to that, I'm only going to say, well, if that is true, if the investment is there, then why haven't we seen the advancements in places that we know money is being invested in? Software, synthesis of different kinds, whether it's reverbs or synthesizers or things of that nature. And that's where the money is too, obviously. Yeah, it was a great year for guitar sales during the pandemic, 400% increases as we've reported here. However, that pales in comparison to over the course of a decade, electronic music production, rap music production, things of that nature spawned. And it's a lot easier for me to sit down as a novice to a drum machine and come up with something than to have to sit down with a guitar and first learn, chords, and then, go from there. That requires an investment of time that is something that is not desirous to a lot of young folks, even a lot of older folks. So it's just, again, a thought that I had, something. I think you only look at classic rock, so then maybe, but there's been a lot of stuff made for young guitar players that don't listen to boomer stuff. Yeah, this is not an issue of boomer sounds. I'm not saying that. Even for the young guys, and I'm not talking about, again, I'm taking the software equation out. Hey, good evening, Mickey. I'm taking the software equation, I'm out, and I'm glad, Newton, that you're the counter because you're a smart guy. So your points are always well taken. Really, seriously, those advancements in software have helped the younger generation, even guitars. But if I was interested in, not even looking at the old records, but if I was interested in a more analog approach, this is a recycling of the same stuff that's been around. There's not the kind of investment that are being made on this aspect of music production than here, is what I'm trying to say, and it's well supported. It's not about the tone of it. And a pedal is going to produce whatever the person who gets out of it. But that's the point. Why would they go at it? Well, see, that's the thing. Because there's been no advancement in analog, since there's been nothing there exciting, since there's been nothing there that's been cutting edge, that's led the tone or sound, then investments in the analog market have fallen. So I guess we're making the same point from a different viewpoint, but yeah, that's it. So now, is that a bad thing? Again, guys, it's like with OCD going out of business. My main thing with that was the loss of the experience in that, and the loss of options. Just because I like to have options. I would like to think that if I was back to 16 years old, working at whatever the modern equivalent of Stevie Wonder's Black Bull Publishing is, that if I was sitting there, I would have the option again of going either of having a choice of doing something with an analog sound, again because I'm trying to replicate something, a tone, an overall tone that can't always be duplicated digitally. There's just some things that you cannot duplicate. It just doesn't happen. It's always that 5%. You get your 95% there, but there's always that 5% margin that's not quite on the money. If I'm trying to get on the money, then I would like the analog equivalent. And I'd like to think that I'd have that option. But these days, the young folks really don't, and they're not encouraged to, and nor, why would they? As Newland said, why would they do it? So we're going to see a decline on one side of this market. But that's saying there's no advancement in CRT TVs and 222. Can you wave your hand in front of the TV? TVs. Again, but that's a market where there is a desire to put in money. The advancements you've seen in TV, I'm talking about investment. I'm saying that there is a lack of investment here for a lot of reasons in analog equipment. Analog, this side of the equation, not the computer side of the equation, but the analog side of the equation. And by the way, there are a lot of young people out there, in their teens and 20s, who are saying, hey, we want to go back to analog. We're going to record analog. YouTube is full of guys like that. And they're searching for those options. They're not thinking in terms of anything other than the creative process and where they think analog is going to take that. But it's becoming a shrinking and shrinking and shrinking market in terms of what's available as opposed to what's available on the digital side because the amount of investment, the money that's put in there. And that is a product, I believe, of where music went, in the last decade or so. I think where popular culture went, entropy is my point. I think it's a decline. I don't see it as an advancement. I see it as a decline. I'm sorry. I do not see it as being something that's better. Alternatives are always better. When you're squeezing yourself to coming down to just this, then you have a situation where a majority of people don't own physical media because they've been forced away from records and then from CDs and then or cassette tapes and CDs and then down to MP3 download that and then from there it went to the cloud. So you don't actually own it. So again, that's where that progresses. That is the march of progression of digitalization. That's where it goes. That's its inevitability. Analog, on the other hand, has a different path that it marches on. Unfortunately, we are in the 21st century. We're no longer in the 20th century, so we are seeing that decline occur on this side of the equation because there's not investment going into it. That's my only point. It saddens me a little bit. Again, every time I see somebody like OCD go away, that's a loss to me that I think of because that's 30, 40 years of experience in analog pedal making that's gone. There are younger guys, as I said, like Greg over there at Greer Lightspeed pedals. I keep talking about them because I think those are fantastic, made in America analog pedals. But again, the squeeze is on with guys like that because of things. So of course, this channel with me, my focus is on production and what is the best path to get there. For me, of course, I use my computer. I'm digital myself. I'm hybrid. I've got a half and half going here. But at the end of the day, the overall tone, I'm chasing tone. It hasn't changed about me since I was a kid. I've been chasing sounds in my head since I was a kid. And a lot of those sounds come from analog sources. And so that's me. The younger generation, guys like Newland, and they're going to be chasing their own tone on their own territory. So that's just the reality of it. You can't, and everybody else, Ben and Mickey, all you guys in between, you're going to be chasing tones, and you're going to have to navigate between those two mediums. But realizing, as I'm saying, that this medium right here, I believe, is a dying one, and it's sad for me because, I'm not that much younger than you. Get out of here! I didn't know that. We had a big discussion. You missed it. I don't think you were here last week, but we had a discussion. We were all telling our ages. And so I'll say it again. I'm 55. So I'm certainly from that age, the Radio Shack age. I miss it. I was remember Tandy Corporation. I was a Radio Shack. I had my card, and every weekend I went there. I was such a nerd as a kid. I was really that kind of kid. 48. Yeah, we went through this last week. Sound off, everybody. That was quite a childhood experience and something that I treasure. And if you never experienced it, you kind of missed out a little bit. Radio Shack was one of those places where you could pretty much find what you were looking for in the electronics. 22. Yeah, Nathan, I'm glad. Thank God we've got 20. I need the opinions of a 22-year-old on this channel. Obviously, 44. Yeah, I'm 10 years. I got 11 years on you, Noodlin, so not as close as you thought. Um, it's it's all this good Dutch weather that keeps me young. Big joke. It was pouring the other day. Yeah, but it's from a sonic standpoint. It's just a loft. That's all. You know, we're 52. Yeah, you, me, Anthony. I had that vibe about you. I knew that you and I were. I don't know why. I knew you and I were really close. Yeah, man. Just saying that it's a sound chase for me. So, but it's a sad thing. I'm sorry. I grew up in it. I'm just gonna to put it out there with you guys as it is. It's a sad thing to see. The investment is not there anymore, really, and a lot of guys are cashing out their chips and moving on. And I'm going to keep my equipment in good condition. Japanese condition is what I call it. Noodlin can attest to this. I tell you, Japanese use is better than some new places. Some stuff new. I'm not kidding. The level of detail that my musicians, these guys are musicians, and like real musicians too, in their attitudes. But when it came to their instruments, their equipment, my God, they were fastidious almost to a fault. So when you go through a Japanese guitar store and look at their used section, you're like, this is an 80s bass. My God, this thing looks brand new. So I will keep my equipment in good order to pass on to the next generation that's interested. Those guys that are in their 20s that are interested in that analog thing. I became an owner of Japanese-made phone casino. Oh, you got the 80s casino. I was looking into those because I was looking at a natural Epiphone, the more recent ones that came out, a natural. The bigger headstock one, right? It's got the slightly bigger headstock to one. Yeah, those are great. Again, good wood. Again, getting back to my earlier comments regarding about the quality of wood that the Japanese were able to source. That's a buy, and yeah, I would take that over. I would take that over the Gibson offering. I'm sorry, the Epiphone offering, the older Japanese ones. The new ones are cool. Don't get me wrong. That's why I was looking at them, but those Japanese ones are actually pretty nice. There's a guy who owns an original 60s casino, and he bought the Epiphone one, and he did a head-to-head to them. You can find that on YouTube. I found that interesting. And I think also he's actually a collector. He had a Japanese one, so that's an interesting comparison. But yeah, guys, getting back to that subject, just the investments is not there. And it's a curious thing to me to point out and discuss with you. I thought I'd bring that up tonight. Well, yeah, I am so glad that everybody is here this evening. I have had myself quite a week. I've been looking at into music business a lot. I've been looking a lot into gangster stuff too. I for some reason on my YouTube feed they started feeding me a lot of Sammy the Bull Gravano stories. And I have no idea why this came up. I don't know what I searched that possibly Wu-Tang had. Yeah, I don't know why this came up in my search, but I started hearing his podcast, and he's talking about all these mob tales. And it got me thinking about, our live stream we did a couple of months ago where I was talking about the death clause in your music contracts. And just to close tonight's show, on a feel-good note, I really seriously, after hearing Sammy's story, who's a great storyteller, if you haven't heard his podcast on YouTube where he's just sitting in a chair and he's just telling you, as it is, you gotta respect, a lot of where he's coming from. But he brought up the music business in one of these podcasts, and it really hit home to me, that Death Claws thing, and I thought to myself, really. And then we had the tribute, the Hawkins tribute concert here recently. Uh, another fantastic musician who's gone. And you really have to sit back and ask yourself, why the hell would anybody want a record contract in this day and age, knowing what we know now? I was looking at Teddy Riley talking on the Vlad TV channel, because I love Teddy. He's my producer friend. I'll give him his respect. Grammy nominated producer friend, Jock Richmond's favorite producer. He always was. He loved Teddy. Teddy was talking about his early days. He started when he was 16 years old. And the contracts that he was involved in, a lot of the stuff, what a great show. The tribute was at Wembley. Amazing evening that. Yeah, it was, Ben. I watched the whole thing. Uh, Man, can Wolfgang Van Halen play? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not putting it down. I'm not saying that I didn't think he could, but he's been, obviously, his dad's been schooling him since he was a kid. But my gosh, he stepped into the footprints of his dad perfectly. That Hot for Teacher solo, or that solo he did. Man, uh, everybody was on it. Everybody was on it on that. Great show. But I thought to myself, even with those guys, like, why? It's just they're. Yeah, Wolfie was amazing. My gosh, that man can play guitar. Honestly, I'm sorry that Eddie is gone, but my goodness, did he leave us with somebody who could really take on the torch without, he's got his dad's tone down. I've heard a lot of people cover those songs, but that's the first time that I heard it, and I was like, that's it. That's it right there. And I'm sure you guys felt the same. But yeah, but why would anybody want, knowing what we know, why would anybody want a record contract? It's crazy. Insane. The fact that Teddy himself, a well-known, and I'm sure you guys know him as a producer. He remember the time he did with Michael Jackson. It wasn't until he started working with Michael Jackson, the years prior to that, he didn't get a dime, or very little. Very little. To this day, he still hasn't received any of the money from his early, and he has written, Dougie Fresh the Show. Wolfie's amazing yeah, he can play drums, he can play, I think his uncle Alex started Wolfie out on drums first. And then he moved over to bass, because I remind you, for a time there, he took Anthony's place in the band as bass player. So it really was Van Halen. It was the Van Halen uncle, father, and son. But anyway, yeah, guys, it just had me thinking about that, because I felt watching that concert and then hearing Sammy talk and the Death Claws and all that. It just started baking in my head. I was like, my goodness, what an industry, to strive to be in. Wonderful moments like this come out of terrible things that happened, and Taylor's death is a tragedy. No matter, his son up there playing, again, he's left us, again, like Bonham's son. John Bonham's son took over there and was playing those Wembley dates when Zeppelin got back together there. But so they're chilled through their children, they move on, but it's still a tragedy, and that's this music business, you know. And again, as I was making the point with Teddy Riley, this guy, uh, you know, Dougie Fresh, the show we were talking about hip hop is a twisted industry for outrageous contracts and controls. Yes, Mickey, absolutely. And we were talking about Dougie Fresh's show, early hip hop. That was Teddy Riley. I didn't know that Teddy Riley produced that early hip hop album, Dougie Fresh the Show. That Introspector Gadget opening things, da 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 da. That's Teddy Riley. That's him playing. He put that track together, and he never got paid for it. He never got paid for other than, you know, he didn't get his royalties on it. He got paid the upfront production fees, which, you know, were not a lot, but he didn't get his royalties on those. So even if you're in the top in the business, you're getting screwed one way or another. And is that something to ascertain? I was thinking to myself, and then all the stresses and all the pressures and everything that leads to untimely death. You know, it's this music business is something, man. It's really something. You know, I've been in it, gee, I guess all my life, and I haven't told you guys the story of the time that I was working in a studio, freelancing in a studio in LA. I was bouncing around, and this was another studio. It was on La Cienega, and La Cienega, yeah, I was on La Cienega, and the owner of this studio was Puerto Rican guy. It was a beautiful studio. It was a really nice SSL studio, and I was in charge of maintenance of everything and setting things up and basically being an engineer sometimes. Uh, I got called into a gig there once, and there were two engineers there, me and this other guy, Brian. Nice guy, nice guy, nice guy. But it was a little bit of a competition between me two because, you know, he wanted the money as much as I did, you know. But on this particular date, I said, you know what, I can't make it. So I didn't go, and I said, Brian, you should take it. And of course, happily, he went. A couple of weeks later, he came up to the other studio that I was working at, my main studio I was working at, a Reggie Andrews recording studio, and came to me and he said, Mike, do you know what happened that day? I said, no. He said, these guys came into the studio and tied us all up and put shotgun to my face. Apparently, the owner of the studio, which I knew, I could tell you guys some pretty raunchy stories of things that I saw happen in that studio, but I won't get into that tonight. But he was involved with gangsters, and Brian just happened to be there on that day and got tied up with a shotgun in his face. And I immediately at that point said to myself, I'm going to be very careful where I work. I never worked for that guy again. I never saw him again. I said, okay, Brian, it's all yours. You can have it. As they say in Japan, dozo. So I learned then at a young age, I was in my early 20s, that is a dangerous business. But the insanity of it now, because of the internet and people coming forward and telling their stories, that you realize the scope of how crazy it is. And so, a great concert. I enjoyed it. It's sad and unfortunate that it had to come out of such a terrible loss to us all, because, you know, cats like him are not a dime a dozen. As Prince used to say, those kind of cars don't pass you every day. And so, yeah. All right, guys, that's it for tonight. I thank you so much for watching the live stream and listening to my ramblings this evening. I want to thank you all you gentlemen, for showing up and sharing and putting your comments in. I'm glad to see you, Newland brother. I was thinking about you. I haven't seen you in a while. I'm glad to see you're doing well. Everybody else, of course, Mickey being all you guys, Anthony, thanks. Yeah, all you guys, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to tune in this evening. Again, this week, there is going to be the acoustic guitar program that I will be doing on the normal show for this channel. So I'll go down to Fern and interview him, and I will splice all that together sitting here. Thank you guys. John, thank you so much for showing up. So you guys will see that this week. I'll try to put that out no later than this Tuesday. So please watch that and support the channel by watching that. For all you guys that are watching this on the rerun, if you enjoyed the contents of this live stream tonight, don't forget to hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, do so. As you can see, we've got a great community full of great guys here, so please do so. Until the next one, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. You guys take care. Bye-bye.